In this video, we are going to look at bone fractures and repair. The healing process of broken bone occurs in 3 phases with 4 different steps. So the reactive phase is going to be the first phase, and it's an early inflammation phase. The reparative phase is broken up into 2 steps. So in the first step, we are going to have the fibrocartilaginous callus is formed. And then in the second step is when we have a bony callus formed. Then the bone remodeling phase is the final phase, and this is where the callus is removed and a healed fracture line may remain. So during the reactive phase, which is the first phase, this is when blood vessels crossing the fracture line are broken. You can see here these blood vessels are broken. Blood leaks from the torn ends of the vessels, and a mass of blood, which is usually clotted, forms around the site of the fracture. This mass of blood, called a fracture hematoma, usually forms about 6 to 8 hours after injury. You have swelling, inflammation, that all occur during this phase. And these occur in response to the dead bone cells in the area. And this is due to blood stopping at the site where the fracture hematoma forms. This causes an influx of phagocytes. These phagocytes are going to be neutrophils and macrophages. And these are essentially phagocytes that are coming in to clean up all these dead cells. You also have osteoclasts, which also come to begin to remove the dead and damaged tissue. This stage might last several weeks. So this one's going to be a couple weeks long. The next phase is going to be the reparative phase. Remember, it happens in 2 steps. So the fibrocartilaginous callus, this is the first step of the reparative phase, and this occurs when blood vessels grow into the fracture hematoma, and the phagocytes begin to clean up the dead bone cells. So here you have this fibrocartilaginous callus right here. Fibroblasts from the periosteum, they invade the fracture and they start to form collagen fibers. You also have chondroblasts in the region. They start to form fibrocartilage, leading to this development of the fibrocartilaginous callus. So this is developed from chondroblasts in the area. And this fibrocartilaginous callus is a mass of repair tissue consisting of collagen fibers and cartilage that bridges the broken ends of the bone. So you're going to bridge these two together with this callus. Formation of the fibrocartilaginous callus takes about 3 weeks. In areas closer to well-vascularized, really healthy bone tissue, you have osteoprogenitor cells develop into osteoblasts, and they will begin to produce spongy bone trabeculae. You can see this here, spongy bone trabeculae. The trabeculae actually join living and dead portions of the original bone fragment, and then in time, this fibrocartilage is actually converted into spongy bone. And then the callus is then referred to as a bony callus or a hard callus. So that's when the cartilage is converted into into bone, into spongy bone. So this callus, the bony callus, lasts for about 3 to 4 months. The final phase of fracture repair is bone remodeling of that callus. So dead portions of the original bone are gradually reabsorbed by osteoclasts. And this is the important part, that compact bone replaces spongy bone around the periphery of the fracture. So in these areas of the sides, this is where we need to have compact bone that actually replaces that spongy bone. And that's going to happen in this phase. Okay, so fractures, just like bones, they're named according to their severity, the shape or position of the fracture line, or sometimes even they're named after the physician who first named them. First off, we have open or compound fractures, and these occur when the broken ends of the bone protrude through the skin. Protrude through the skin, so these are open fractures. Comminuted fractures are when the bone is splintered, crushed, or broken into pieces at the site of impact. So you can definitely see that here in this picture. And you have a lot of smaller bone fragments that lie between the two main fragments. So we're going to have splintered or crushed broken pieces. And they're going to have a lot of small fragments between the two larger main fragments. A green stick fracture, these ones are partial fractures in which one side of the bone is broken and the other side bends. This is similar to a way that a green twig breaks on one side while the other side stays whole, but it bends. Usually this occurs only in children whose bones are not fully ossified, and they contain more organic material than inorganic material. So we're going to say that these are partial one side breaks. This is one side of the bone will break and then the other side bends. Impacted fractures. This is when one end of the fractured bone is forcefully driven into the interior of the other. So they're actually like pushed into each other. Potts fractures occur when the distal end of the lateral leg bone, the fibula, breaks. So distal fibula breaks. And there's also serious injury to the distal tibial articulation. Injury to the distal tibial articulation. And remember that articulation is just a point where two bones meet at a joint. Cole's fractures occur when the distal end of the lateral forearm bone, the radius, actually when it breaks and the distal fragment is displaced posteriorly. So we have the distal radius, fractures, and displaced posteriorly. It's actually just going to be the distal fragment is going to be displaced posteriorly. And that will be the end of Chapter 6, Part 4.